All right, guys, welcome back. Excited to have you with us. This is the first episode after the Dad Edge podcast went live, where I was a guest on that one. So, Larry, if you're listening, I appreciate you greatly for having me on. It was really cool, a lot of fun. Glad you listened to us, and I finally got around to listening to it as well. That was a good time. I understand why people were so jazzed up and fired up about that one. So, keep doing your thing, Larry. You're doing the world good. So, all right. It's Thanksgiving time. I'm excited. We've got Josh Hatcher with Manlihood. He's got a podcast called Manlihood. I've known him online and virtual for years now. And gosh, he's got over 500 shows. He's a dad. His kids are adult kids these days. So it's neat to learn from the guys that have some adult kids. And he's been married for 26 years. Kind of different. His wife's a pastor. So I don't know that I've interviewed anyone else. I think there's one other guy that I know of whose wife is a pastor. So, well, welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Yeah. You'll probably get lots of like nasty comments because like that happens on the internet a lot. Like everybody's like, they'll send you like verses from the Bible where they like just don't agree. I don't know why that is so divisive of a topic because like I understand that there are verses in the Bible that you could take to mean that women can't be in ministry, and I understand why you could interpret them that way. But um I don't interpret that verses that way because I look at the rest of scripture and I interpret those verses to see it differently. And we're not going to debate that.
I'm
you know?
I'm good. I'm good with that. It's funny how one of my friends, he was a Protestant pastor,
Mhm.
had a nice congregation, and he converted to Catholicism. And he knows me well, and he says, "How in the heck do you talk to this person and this person and this?" Like, you can understand what everybody's talking about, where they're coming from, and like like you fit in wherever you are, no matter how they're interpreting the Bible.
Exactly.
I'm like, you can learn from everybody, and we're all on our own. It's part of the title of the podcast. We're all on our own journey, and growing closer to Christ. And so I'm not one to be like real divisive.
Yeah.
However, I'm willing to, listen and have conversation and, you know, not not hate on people. And it's like, where are you at? Where are we going? How are we gonna get there? So
Yeah. I think that like most people, when they have conversations, I think that happens. I think that the internet brings out this side of people that you wouldn't say that to somebody's face.
so while we're on this, so I'll be clear on my position. When you mentioned your wife was a pastor, I went, what? I didn't know that.
Right?
And then I'm like, okay. And my next thought is, gosh, tell me more about that. Like, how does your wife preach, and how does your, we can skip that whole conversation. However, that was immediately where my like, tell me about that. What's that world look like? Like, I don't hang around that world, but tell me all about that. Again, we can skip that, but instead of being like critical of people and getting after people, and it's like, tell me about it. What's that look like? You know, how'd your wife get to where she's at? And how are you where you are? Anyway, so welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? That could be a really interesting conversation if we ever wanted to have that someday. But yeah, it is an awesome and crazy life, man. And I honestly, you know what I think when it comes to that side of things, I'll just give you a real quick heads up on it. I think 90% of what we do in the Western world when it comes to church is so like out of whack anyway, right? Like like we have so many ideas about church that like doesn't even look anything at all like what the Bible says that church is, right? Like that's
So
just my thought. I'm
throw
like,
throw throw one of them out there. What's one off the top of your head?
so they just found a church. It's the earliest church building, the first like one of the earliest church buildings or dedicated spaces that they
I saw
found.
I saw a news story on this.
Right. And they just found it, and it's so it's just the floor. That's all they've discovered.
Right, right.
Um, and it's the floor is, I don't remember how big it is, but let's just say it's like the size of, maybe like the size of a house, like an average
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
Um, and it's like a mosaic floor, and in the center of the floor there's a spot where there was a table, and it's clearly a table, and there's an inscription on the floor that actually calls it a table. It's not described as an altar. The Greek, it's written in Greek. It's actually described as a table. The word is used to describe it as a table, not an altar, not a pulpit, but a table. And then there's 7 names inscribed on the floor to describe the people who founded and worked at the church and that were involved in building this church and that were involved in it. And out of the 7 names, 5 of them are women.
The
You
story
know,
I didn't have, the story I read didn't have all that, but yeah, it was a smaller
yeah,
room. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that, so, I'm just like, okay, well, that is an interesting story, and I'm just like, okay, that's more information than we would have known about what the early church looked like, than what we would see based off of what the church looks like if you go to walk in your average church in America today. you know I just picture them all sitting around the table eating, pitas and olives and lamb, and having a conversation. I think we get it all mixed up. That's my take on it. But
Yeah, so I know you've got some and I'm interested. My kids being younger, 12 and 11 right now. So I can see the driving, I can see the college. It's just ahead of me. And I can also certainly remember when my kids were little bitty, we were having a conversation at dinner tonight about toddlers and pre-K and what ages. And my 12-year-old is putting her rules for words and ages. Like when they're walking, then they become this. And when they're 2, they become, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So seeing the world through her eyes is funny. But yeah, so I can remember the super young ages and I can see ahead to college. And your kids are now college and older
yeah,
ages.
yeah, I got grandkids.
Wow. How many grandkids do you have?
So I've got 3 and 1 on the way. My daughter has a 3-year-old, and then they have a 13-year-old that they're kind of adopting. And then we have another little girl that is about to turn 2, and then they've got another little boy on the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a lot of fun, man. So we
Yeah.
had kids pretty young. We had twins in our 1-year wedding anniversary. And then so then they decided to all get married pretty young. And then so this is kind of funny. We had twins in our 1-year wedding anniversary. So then one of the twins decided to get married on their mom's birthday because they thought that would be funny. And then my youngest daughter decided, hey, it'd be really funny. How about I get married on my dad's birthday? So yeah, that's the thing now. Our family gets married on each other's birthdays. So
How funny.
yeah.
So when you're looking out and your kids being adult kids, what's some things that you think about from a younger family standpoint, things that dads should do or look out for, be careful of, or any of that type stuff?
Yeah. So anticipate your regrets. And when I was a younger man, somebody told me that. That's the exact words that my friend Andy told me. He said, anticipate your regrets. And I didn't get it. And I don't think you're going to get it when I tell you, you know what I mean? Somebody's going to tell you that right now. I'm going to tell you that. Anticipate your regrets. And you're not going to get it until you're old and then you have regrets. But I'm hoping that you pay attention, and that, the guys that are listening, all of you, pay attention to this, because you're going to say things now in frustration and in anger, and you're going to do things now in moments where you're gonna miss moments now with your kids. You're gonna do things now that you can't take back, or that you can't do over, that you're gonna wish you could. You're gonna wish things away. You're gonna, man, I just wish we could get past these toddler years. I just wish we could get past having to change diapers. And then you're going to get past that stage and you're going to realize, man, I wish she would just crawl up in my lap and let me hold her again. And we can't go back there now. I wish she would still hold my hand when we go to the store, but that's not happening anymore.
Hmm.
you know and so if you like, you are gonna, all of these things that, like, life is gonna go so fast, and you're gonna get frustrated and you're gonna lose your cool and you can't take it back once it's come out of your mouth, and you're gonna, all the things, right? Like, life is short and it goes by like that. And all when you speak words in anger, you can't take them back. When you hurry up to try to get to the next phase of life, then you regret that you went too fast. I mean, all of it, man. I'll tell you now, like with my adult kids, especially when they were like young adult, like, they were in college, and like, man, dude, that was the worst. That was the hardest. That was actually harder than teenagers. Especially with the older two, because we had no idea what we were doing. The last one, man, it was a piece of cake. By that point, we're like, oh, we know what we're doing. She can do whatever she wants. you know but the first two, we didn't know what we were doing. And like, so they're like, they were living at home and they went to school, because we were just a mile or so from the college. And that was, we didn't have any money to pay for college, so that was how we paid for school, was you could still live here while you pay for your school. And so they were, there were rules that had to live by. And that's fine, you should have rules in your home, but trying to enforce those rules, you still treat them like they're little kids. And I was a jerk. I should have treated them with more respect and more dignity as an adult, and not been such a jerk. I can't take that back. I did damage to that relationship with my son and with my daughter, with the twins, and I can't take that back. I lost trust with them. I put a wedge between us. Can't take that back. And there's points in all, the same with my middle son, and even the same with my daughter. Like, I think, like, my youngest daughter, I think, like a lot of those things we're starting to kind of smooth out. We're kind of starting to work through now and get some healing for, but you're going to have regrets. And if I can tell you now from this side of it, try to think about what they might be before you make the mistake, before you say the stupid thing. Will I regret this on the other side? Because we want to think we're standing on principle, right?
Mm-hmm.
There will be none of this in my house. Dude, really? Is that what that's not the hill you're gonna die on? Because the honest truth is, was that thing that big of a deal? Because honestly, there were a lot of things that really weren't that big of a deal. I know that there are things that are right and wrong, and there are things that I probably could have made a big, I mean, obviously there should be no drugs in my house. You know what I mean? There's some things that just shouldn't be in my house. I don't want my kids going out and, driving my car drunk. That wasn't even an issue at my house, you know? But I might have not needed to make such a big deal about what time you come home when you're an adult, or maybe they forgot to let me know where they were, but I knew they weren't getting into that much trouble. You know what I mean? And so,
You mentioned where you are and time you got home. My younger brother, I have one brother, 3 years younger than me, and I had a little bit of, where are you? When will you be home? That type stuff. my, my younger brother, he was like they played hockey, Sega hockey and Blackhawks and Red Wings was the big thing back then, and they'd play that all night long, either at our house or at his buddy's house, and stay up to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and he'd just be and I'm like, hey, where's Mike at? Uh, like, what does it matter? He's not going
Well,
to be getting in trouble. It's
right.
like
The
wait,
younger
this
brother
wasn't.
always gets away with it.
He's only 3 years younger than me, but yeah, it was a radically different experience for him than for me.
Right.
Between the two of us, my parents were right.
Right. And that's just the way it goes. And the other end of it is every kid's different too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah. And
you're gonna
there
raise
was
every kid, you're gonna raise every kid different. And you have to have different rules for each kid. And that's just the honest truth because one kid might make worse mistakes than the other kid, and one kid might be more trustworthy than the other kid. But at the same time, when they're adults, dude, a little bit of freedom isn't gonna hurt anybody. And I think I should have been more understanding of that. But regardless of all of that, I think the what really mattered is how I acted. I just acted like a jerk. You know, it wasn't about the thing. It was about how I acted. You know, and and so I've tried to make it a point. And this is really I think what matters more than anything else. Not just anticipating your regrets, but when you act like a jerk, make it right. Let them know you're sorry. Go back and apologize and say, hey, it took me too long to do this. And this is the stuff I've been trying to do lately is, hey, I recognize, you know, in 2016, 2017, that time frame, I didn't treat you right. And I'm really sorry about that. And we've been, bridging that gap and working through that. And, it's helpful. So,
do you know Blake Brewer, by the way?
no.
I'll get his stuff to you, but he's got something called the Legacy Letter, and in
Mm,
part of this Legacy Letter, he designed this because his dad drowned while they were on a family vacation in Hawaii. It was just him and his dad. The whole rest of the family was there, and he's college age kid, and his dad's a NFL um, lifeguard. Like this, his dad was no reason for his dad to have drowned other than the current swept him up and bashed him into some rocks. And but
mm,
anyway, his dad had written him this letter like, "I love you, I believe in you." Mom's like, "Hey, your dad, died," and he wrote this letter to give you on this trip. So anyway, his whole mission now is to help men write a long-lasting letter to their kids that speaks into them what you think. And part of that letter is the regret part. And I've been with him while he was coaching guys, and guys are like, I want to tell him I'm sorry. I want to tell him I regret. But you know what they did? And the guys will write that in there. I'm sorry. I was really bad and my attitude and the stuff. But you know what you were doing at this time? You were like a really jerk kid and like you were screwing all
right,
this stuff.
right, right.
It's
That's
like,
not,
shut up. Leave that part out. Don't
yeah,
justify your behavior.
right, right. And that's the hard part is because that's not fully taking responsibility.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the things that I talk about is like ownership is saying it doesn't matter what you did, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, right? Like, dude, women get this. like, so, like, let's say your kid spills juice, like especially little kids, right? Like, it doesn't matter who spilled the juice; it just gets cleaned up.
Right, right.
Somebody
Yep.
has to clean it up, you know, and they just like jump up and clean it up, you know. And like we just sit there going, "Oh, somebody spilled the juice," you know. Who spilled the juice? Who, and they're like, it doesn't matter, just needs to be cleaned up, and like it doesn't matter whose fault it is. Somebody has to pick it up. That's what responsibility is. So I'm just gonna take responsibility and we'll take care of it, you know.
Hmm.
Same thing with, so okay, so somebody made the mess here, and maybe it wasn't you. Maybe your kid was a jerk. Okay, what are you gonna do to make it right? you know, maybe your kid was the jerk. Maybe your kid did go out and get high and wreck your car, and you didn't have enough insurance to cover it. Maybe that did happen. What are you gonna do to make it right? Let's look at it. Why did your kid go get high?
Yep. Could fall back. Could fall back.
I mean, I don't mean to point fingers, but like there's more to the story. And if we're really digging into fault, we could get into fault. But that doesn't still solve the problem.
One thing I'm picking up from you is just our attitude, our tone. So on one hand, it matters what we say and do, but bigger than that is our attitude, our tone of voice, our physical demeanor, and like how did we attack, or how did what where was our heart at? And our heart, if our heart is for revenge, or our heart is for crushing somebody, or it's like, well, you may reconsider that um,
I I think
behavior.
that's really the lesson that I think I've been learning the past couple years, especially is I think I should have learned it long before that, but it's really just a lesson of grace, the lesson of like, there's nothing that you deserve. There's nothing that I deserve. Everything good in my life I have because God gave me grace. God didn't like look at me and say, "You're so special. You earned this love." No, he said, uh, you messed up, buddy. You messed up. And you sinned and it separated me from you. And I paid the cost for you so that you could be made right with me. And I love you that much. And that's why I did it. So that we could be right together. Like I could have this relationship with you. That's the model that God the Father set for me. And so if I want to have a relationship with my kids, I need to model that. I need to follow the same thing he did. Like that's what grace is. That's not, I hate English sometimes, right? Like because like we think grace and we think, oh, she's got style, she's got grace. And you think of like a graceful ballerina, and it's like
Right.
that's not that's we have one word to describe two different things, you know, and or you say grace at the dinner table,
Hmm.
that's then it's now it's one word for three things, and so like you now have cheapened the word from what it's supposed to mean. Like grace is like unmerited favor.
Hmm.
It's like something huge and heavy. It's God comes in and he's like, hey buddy, you screwed up and I took care of it for you. Like that's huge. And so I'm trying to learn how to model that because that's what he gave me. And I'm trying to pass that along. And I'm not always getting it right. And that's also grace.
have you got any things that you've learned that you could share about how to do that?
Honestly, I think it just comes down to like making sure that your anger is let out in healthy ways, first of all. Like don't let out your anger towards the people that you're angry at. Like I love to go to the gym and like try to, you know, exercise, try to swim, try to hit the heavy bag, you know what I mean? Or,
Hmm.
or find other ways to express whatever other emotions that I've got so that when I'm interacting with people, like I'm not pulling from that well of repressed junk and then dumping it on people.
Right.
Like I put that emotion now through those other avenues, like through painting or through writing or music,
Oh yeah,
and
I skipped all that in your intro.
yeah, that's all right.
Musician and artist.
Yeah, but that's that matters, because then like you get all that stuff out that way, like you can write your poetry and you can get all that feeling out, you can journal if you're or woodworking, or whatever, something that you do, archery, or something to channel that emotion, get that emotion sorted out so that
So there's a new listener right now, and I want to interrupt what you're saying because this guy has got kids, multiple age ranges, younger still. Uh, he says, my relationship with my kids is great. My relationship with my wife, well, we're going through some things right now. And I think what you're just talking about is a big part of his issue. So, picture having four kids, 10 and under, and you've been married 11 years or so. What may have happened and what's a pretty common pattern? You talk to a lot of guys and hear, how things are going. Um, and where I'm kind of going with that to make for sure you're tracking is like you mentioned, all the different hobbies, different things to do, different things that are mine. Like I enjoy running and working out and hanging out with my guys. Like in the morning, I got a group that we do that with. If I rip that out of my life and I don't have any of my hobbies, if I don't have any of my things, if like in my life, I'll speak to it. I quit watching Sunday football, which was fine. Actually, I'm not the biggest NFL fan anymore after they stole my St. Louis Rams from me. Uh, I do like the Chiefs, so I'll watch the Chiefs game from time to time. But when you strip all that out, and the only thing you're doing is taking care of your wife and your kids and working, some guys will do the hamster wheel thing where they'll work 12 hours, 16 hours a day and brag about all that. Is that something that you see pretty commonly as guys that?
Yeah, yeah. I also see guys that also do all their hobbies too to run away from it too. So you see both sides of it, right? Like they run away from their problems with their hobbies, or they run away from their problems with their work. So like you see both sides of it, like, or they use their hobbies as a numbing agent rather than an outlet too, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can do both of those things, but you definitely have to have some, like, don't use your hobby as a numbing agent. That I think is important, because if you're just using the Sunday football to numb it, if you're just using the archery, like, you can't use the thing to make yourself forget about your problem. You have to use the hobby as something to be an outlet to, you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah, yeah.
have it as something to enjoy, but have it be
And
something to,
and we didn't even talk about the, Joe
yeah,
six pack every night or,
right, right.
smoking weed all the time.
Yeah.
We're talking about a healthy, in theory, you
Yeah,
can look at, oh,
it,
that's a healthy
but even a
hobby.
healthy thing, man, the gym can be the numbing
Yeah.
agent. Any of that stuff can be you can be the thing that you use to avoid your family. So it can't be that. But yes, I know, I totally get it. I don't mean to derail the
No, no, no. You're exactly right. Yeah.
my ADHD is kicking in, which we haven't even talked about that yet. But
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Yeah. On
yeah,
both sides of it. Yeah. We can stay
yeah.
away from family
But
with,
you've got to have a good balance of making sure that you are giving and dude, I'm gonna tell you what, man, like I don't mean to get too political with this statement, but our economy is such right now that it makes it very difficult, right? To like it feels like you've got to have two jobs, your spouse has got to have a job just to be able to make ends meet, and then you still have to have time for your kids, you know what I mean? And then you still have to have, like, when do you have time to have time for your family, and then have time to then get a date with your spouse or get time with your spouse? Like that's hard. So, and my response to that is you might have to scale back on the way that you live, and you might have to live more simply in order to be able to afford that. You might have to invest in yourself so that you are more valuable, so that someone will pay you more money, which is difficult and is a sacrifice to be able to do that. But even still, that also involves cutting back on things in order to make that happen. So if you need to learn to be a welder so that you can get paid more money per hour, then you have to sacrifice to make that happen, or whatever the thing is, right? You can't just assume you're going to make more money than that, but whatever. My point is, though, that like you can't use the economy as an excuse to not be a good dad and to be a good husband, right? You still have to be a good husband, and you have to be a good dad, and you have to provide for your family. All of those things have to exist. So you have to figure it out. um So it's not a challenge that nobody else has ever had to figure out. I mean, they figured it out during the Great Depression, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I was watching The Price is Right last night. My wife comes home and she's like, "Why are you watching The Price is Right?" I'm like, "I just like it." You know, I was watching The Price is Right and I'm like, all these things come up and they're bidding on them. And it was like from all the way back in the 70s. I'm like, man, these things were more expensive then than they are now. You know, someone like there was a gas grill on there that was like $400. I'm like, I could buy that thing for $198 now, you
Huh.
know?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so like some things are just that way. So my point though is that, like, the economy is the economy and it's never going to get, you can't just wait around for that to change. You just got to change your economy and you got to change your mindset and figure out what you can afford. And if it means you live more simply, guess what? You can live more simply. You know, maybe you don't need the car payment. Maybe you get a beater. You know, I mean, you can drive an old beat up conversion van that you buy for $1,500. I did that for a long time. We made it work. You know, it was ugly.
I at some point I'll have a finance show on, but one of the guys I hang out with a lot, he does a weekly finance thing in the morning called Wealth Building, and we constantly talk about vehicles, average car payments, whatever it is these days, say $700 a car. So close to $10,000 over with insurance and everything else, over $10,000 a year per vehicle in your household forever. Like if instead of no car payment, you could be a multimillionaire with just car payments instead. So because you choose to live 5 years in the future today with the nicer vehicle, uh, there's a story about a guy that wanted a certain vehicle and instead he saved up 5 years, bought it used for 35% of the price of the new one.
Mm-hmm.
He had a paid off vehicle,
Yeah.
you know? So rather than somebody else,
But,
anyway, guys,
but
vehicles, pay attention. Pay
yeah,
attention
but
where your money's going.
and that all comes back to, like, yes, so you need to take time for yourself to do some of the things you like to do, because yes, if you want to be, you have to fill up your tank to be able to be there for your family, you know. And yeah, and you talked about the guy who his relationship with his spouse isn't going great. Well, listen, if your relationship with your spouse isn't going great, then your relationship with your kids won't be going great for very long. Like, that's your foundation and you need to put that one first, because the order should be, you need to be healthy, your relationship with your spouse needs to be healthy, then your relationship with your kids can be healthy. And if it's not, then it won't stand. It's like you're building a house on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
sticks instead of bricks. It's going to fall over, you know. So
Yep. Yeah, I remember we had that conversation with our kids. Dad, are you telling me you love mom more than me? Yep.
yeah, yeah.
What? Like, no, I love you. I love her. However, I think your real question is where my priorities are. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Me and your mom, we're going to live here for a really long time together. And
Yeah,
at some point, you're going to move out.
yeah.
So when you're, wondering how things are going to go down, me and mom are a team and we'll support you, we'll help you, we'll do whatever. But when it comes to at the end of the day, I'm going with mom.
Hey man, I'll tell you what, when they do move out, you got to figure out how to love her again though. It's all new, man. The empty nest thing is different. That's been a challenge, is figuring out how to navigate that. And we had to figure, like, we liked each other and we loved each other, but it was like, oh, who are we? So
Mm-hmm.
so that's been kind of it's been a different world navigating all of that. And like, I didn't take very good care of my health. Um and so, like, now I'm like trying to, my wife did. So I'm like, man, my wife, like, I get like this, fit young, 40 something wife, and she's got this, fat slob who can't keep up with her. So I'm like, I got to get myself under control. So I've been working out and trying to get healthy and lose weight. And she's like, come on, man, we could do this. And she's like hiking up the side of mountains. And I'm like, I'll see you later, honey.
So I
But
tell everybody about F3. So check out f3nation.com and see if there's a group near you, man. It's fantastic. It's an
yeah, they are doing good
easy way
stuff.
to get fit. Um, so you mentioned getting married younger. I got married older. So and kids came along a little bit later in life with what do you call it? Infertility challenges and a few miscarriages and things like that. So I kind of had the gift of a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of experience, a little bit of a bunch of my guy friends being a little bit ahead of me as far as how long they'd been married and how old their kids were and that kind of thing. And so I had the foresight of what you're talking about, the empty nest syndrome. So my wife and I had a lot of conversations about, you know, who are we as a couple and where are we going and vision and hey, the kids will be at this age and how do we stay close and connected together? And we see, people we hang out with are like, wow, those two are married, but separate. Like they live different lives and don't really communicate well and come together well. So we like to do like on Sundays, just catch up of the week and, ask each other questions, review, what's going well, what could you use help with, what's this week look like and where can we support each other? Where's our responsibilities? Where's our time going to be spent? It's just things like that that I think a lot of people miss out on.
So we don't communicate that way, like sit down and spell it out, but we live by Google Calendar.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So with my wife being a pastor, very busy, lots of meetings. So she's a pastor and then she's a Free Methodist pastor. So she's also a district leader. So she's in charge of several churches. Gosh, she's super busy and super like, she does so much. So she's got meetings scheduled all the time. And then I work, then I have several side things I do, including a podcast. And I've always got podcast interviews and meetings and stuff. So I have to keep them on the Google Calendar. And then I'm also like a worship leader at our church. And then I'm on several different things. I've got meetings and stuff all the time. So Google Calendar, and I'm also very ADHD. So the two of us are, and if we did not have our Google Calendars synced up, we would be in so much trouble because we're constantly on the go. So we may not necessarily sit down and be like, hey, let's talk about what our week looks like. It's usually more like in passing. But what we've had to do for our relationship is we're like Friday night is date night. And our family knows it. Our kids know it. Very rarely do we ever say, okay, we're going to do something different on a Friday night. Like recently we watched the grandbaby on one of the grandbabies on a Friday night, and we moved our date night to another time because our kids needed that Friday to be able to have their date night. And we watched the grandbaby and we did something different for our date night. Now, very rarely do we do that. But usually Friday night is our time where we do nothing else, get together, we go out to eat, or we stay at home and watch a movie, or we do something where it's just us. And I think Friday is kind of her Sabbath, where she takes the day and just does nothing. And Saturday is kind of mine because, again, with church work, we're both doing stuff. So we don't get our Sabbath together. And that's kind of fine too. But we're typically, a lot of times during the week, we're kind of like ships passing in the night. but if we didn't have our Google Calendar, we would be, there would be no way we would function.
So you mentioned the ADHD. Does your wife have ADHD or no?
She's not been diagnosed. She says that sometimes she thinks she might have a little bit. I don't think she has hyperactivity. I think
she's moderate, if any.
Yeah. I think she might sometimes have trouble focusing, but I don't think she has it. My daughter has it really bad, and that's how I realized I had it. We homeschooled our kids, and she was just like poking her pencil through the drywall when she was supposed to be paying attention, and she was like randomly, like she'd go in the bathroom for like an hour and like fold up all the toilet paper and like, just like, she just was like wired, and I'm like, maybe we took her to the doctor, like, does she have ADHD? And they're like, yes, this is definitely what she has. I'm like, do I have ADHD? Because I didn't know what it was. I just kind of didn't believe in it until I had a kid who had it, and I realized, oh. So we didn't really believe that you should put a kid on stimulants at the time. So we went to the doctor to learn strategies. And I still don't believe you should be putting kids on stimulants unless it's so severe that you have no other option. That's really honestly my belief. Like some people I understand are so severe they need some help, but I think that they've put, it's dangerous to be given medication to little kids. I think half of our problem is that we're trying to shove kids into an 8 hour a day classroom and expect them to behave like they're adults. That's half of our problem, right?
And and when you get to that topic, but putting boys in that environment,
Right.
regardless of ADHD,
Right. Right.
like
Into a system that is designed to make children into industrial workers and soldiers, which is
yeah,
what the system is designed to do. We could get into that philosophy, and that's another whole story, and we could talk about that podcast. Matt
yeah,
Boudreau from Apogee, I
yeah. I
had
saw
him on
you
my
just had him
podcast.
on.
Did you have him on?
No, I saw you just
Oh
had
yeah,
him
I had
on.
him on. Fantastic. And had him on, and we talked about that. He's doing amazing work with education, but that conversation was fantastic. We talked a lot about the school system and education, but uh, that'd be a great conversation if you ever want to look something up. If you look up my episode I did with him a while back. Um, but yes, that conversation was really deep and really interesting. But anyway, so yes, I'm ADHDing. I apologize.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how my wife found out she had ADHD also was she was a school teacher and being around kids and finally she started seeing behaviors. So not like this ADHD conversation we're having right now, but
Yeah.
actually um, seeing things that ADHD people do that are common around ADHD people. I'll use one for example. There's something called a doomsday box or whatever. I don't know if you've ever
Oh
heard that
yeah.
term.
Oh yeah. Dude, if I were to pick up this if I were to pick up my computer and if I were to walk around my studio, this room is actually a doomsday box. And across the hall there's another room where the whole room is a doomsday box. I like Yeah.
Did you know this concept prior to me just saying that?
Yes. Yeah. Where you
Okay.
basically it's just like everything just gets dumped in it because you don't know
Yeah.
what to do with the stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. I have rooms that are that in my house. And nobody else is allowed to go in them because I don't know what to do with the stuff.
So like take a non-ADHDer and we live with you and we go, what the hell is this? Like this makes no sense at all.
Um,
And ADHDers that are aware of this behavior go, you're right. This makes no sense at all. And it's the way I've just how it works. Like,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
or a wrapper laying around somewhere,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
even on the countertop above the trash can. So like you could pull the trash can open and
yeah,
knock the wrapper in.
yeah, yeah. That stuff is just like I don't understand why I do that. That was almost like it's because I started to throw it away and then my brain just glitched and I didn't think to throw it away. That happens. But like the yeah, the and then so when I went to get tested, I finally said, okay, I'm gonna go get tested. And I think I talked to a friend who had ADHD and he got on Adderall. And he's like, look, this changed my life. You need to go look into it. And so I went and I talked to the psychiatrist or psychologist, whichever one is allowed to prescribe
Yeah, right,
medicine.
right. One of the two.
I
Yeah.
can't keep track. It doesn't make sense to me. And he's like, all right, what makes you think you have ADHD? And I opened up my phone. I went to my Google Docs. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Okay. Because if you're watching this video, you'll be able to appreciate it. If you're just listening to the podcast, you won't appreciate it. But um, I opened my Google Docs and I said, do you see this? This is all of my books that are unfinished.
Oh my gosh.
And he goes,
So guys, people sometimes want to write a book. I just saw 50 different books to flip through.
and he said, oh, yes, that's all I need to see. And he wrote me a prescription. um, and so he wrote me a prescription for Adderall, and I started taking it, and within a week, I literally felt like my brain. I was like, this is how normal people feel. like I just could think so clearly. Like, and it wasn't a super high dose. I told him, I said, I don't like medicine. I don't want to take too much. I want you to start me on a reasonable dose. I don't want to be drugged up. I don't want to, I just want a small dose. He says, okay. He says, well, I think that you should be taking this much. He said, so let's start you on less, and then we'll gradually scale you up to less than what I think you should take then, basically is the compromise he was willing to do. So he started me on a little bit, and then he scaled me up to less than what he thought I should take. And he said, that sounds like a reasonable compromise, because I didn't want to, oops, I dropped my phone, because I didn't want to take too much. And I said, okay, that sounds fair. And so that's what we did. And like that first year, like I lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
Like he told me that like a lot of times people end up gaining weight. I had the opposite. He said, because sometimes it makes you hungry. He says, sometimes when you're coming down off of the Adderall, like you get hungry or you get grumpy. I did get a little grumpy when like it was supposed to be extended release, but like he said, like at the end of your, like in the afternoon, you'll start to get a little, but dude, I was like, I was a little bit more aggressive. But generally I felt alive. I felt clear. I wrote and published 8 books that year. Killed it with my podcast. Did great with my job. I was just doing amazing things that year because I could just think so clearly, and got caught up on all these projects that I was behind on. And like, I was just doing amazing at everything I was doing. I was just doing great. And then, my father died, and when the grief started to hit, I kind of started eating some fatty foods again, hitting the energy drinks, because I'm grieving. So I'm kind of sluggish, and I'm eating some fatty foods that are bad for me. And so I'm feeling sluggish. I didn't really put on a whole bunch of weight, but I was definitely feeling like slowing down, you know what I mean? And so I was drinking like an energy drinks in the morning and taking the Adderall. And then I'm sitting at work and I feel like, I think you'll appreciate the story, but some of the guys will definitely appreciate the story, but like I start to feel funny and I'm like, maybe I have to go poop. Maybe that's all I need. Maybe I'll feel better. When I go in the bathroom, like I definitely don't have to poop. I come back to my desk and I'm like, something is not right. And I started to feel the chest pains then, and it started to go down my arm.
Yeah, describe that a little bit for us, because this one can be really important because men feel this differently than women feel this.
Yeah, so it felt like a dull pain, almost like have you ever been like stabbed by like something that wasn't super sharp, like a pencil rather than a knife? You know how like that feels? It felt like that going through like my back, coming through like my chest, like it felt like it was
behind your heart.
Yeah.
When you say your back, specifically the left side.
Like it felt like it was coming through my heart from behind. Like I could feel it. And then my arm started to feel like it was going numb with like a sharp pain down the inside of my arm. Like you could feel like it felt like a vein, like a sharp pain down the vein on the inside of my arm. And then like even like my jaw kind of felt like tight. And I'm like, something's not right. I didn't feel like I was passing out or anything like that, but I knew it wasn't right. So I went over and I told my boss, I'm like, hey, I don't feel great. I'm going to go to the hospital. He goes,
wow, that's bizarre.
He says, do you want me to drive you? Do you need to call the ambulance? I'm like, no, I'm okay. So I drove myself to the hospital. I called my wife on the way. I'm like, hey, honey, I'm going up to the hospital. I don't feel really good. I think I'm having a heart attack. Are you driving? Yes, I'm driving. So I drove myself to the hospital and I walked in And I'm like, hey, I think I might be having a heart attack. And the nurses don't take me seriously because I'm walking in there
Right.
and I say
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
having a heart attack. And they're like, um, and I'm like, yeah, like, did you describe your symptoms? And I described them, and they rush me in, and then they put me on the monitors, and like the monitors aren't really revealing a whole lot, but then they test my blood levels and they see that the troponin enzyme has been released, and that is typically only released when there's been heart damage, right?
Mm.
And they can tell that my heart rate is way up, but it's
Hmm.
enough that with those two things, that means that I'm in a heart attack mode, and my blood pressure is sky high. So we live in a community like in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. So there's like we don't have a heart lab in our hospital. We're like an hour and a half from Erie, or actually like almost 2 hours from Erie. So they're like, okay, we've got to, we're gonna monitor you here. They sent me up to the ICU, and this was in the middle of COVID. So like my wife is like, they wouldn't even let her in to see me
Right.
at
Yep.
first, and then they finally let her in, but they wouldn't let her go up to ICU with me. So I go up to ICU by myself. Um, and then when I'm up there, they give me nitro. They're like, and at one point I'm up there, and like I actually felt like at one point I think that whatever they were giving me to lower my blood pressure, I think it actually bottomed me out. Like at one point I felt like I thought I was actually a goner at one point, and I don't know if it was the way the medicine made me feel or what, but something was way off. Meanwhile, I'm texting all my buddies throughout this whole thing, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm sending them goofy pictures and gifs, and I'm like like I'm just goofing off, because my typical response to this stuff is to goof off, to make jokes, because and my one friend is like, I think you need to take this seriously, Josh. And I'm like, I think you need to let me joke about this, because if I don't, I'm gonna die. like laughter is good medicine. The Bible says that. Laughter does the heart good. Like, let me joke, because that's the only thing I've got right now. My wife did not appreciate me joking with the nurses. She did not appreciate me sending the gifts to my friends, but I had to. Like, it was the only thing keeping me sane. And so like that's how I got through it, was making jokes. Like that was like I needed that. And so then they monitor me for a little while, then they send me up to Erie to the heart lab. They do a stress test, and then they decide they want to do a heart cath. They did say that I was in acute heart attack when I was
Mm.
in Bradford. I get up to Erie, they do the heart cath, and I'm laying on the table. They give me I think they give me a Valium so that I don't notice, the heart cath going in. It feels really squeaky. Like you can feel it like squeak. It goes in my groin, and it goes all the way. You can feel like the squeaking is going through your arteries, and it gets into my heart, and you can feel it squeaking around in there. And I hear the doctor going, huh, hmm, okay. And he pulls it out, and I hear him say, well, there's no damage. I say, there's no damage? He says, yeah, I guess you didn't have a heart attack. I said, or, and I said, or I had a heart attack and I was healed miraculously, because that makes sense. And I said, that makes sense to me. And the one nurse goes, amen, that makes sense to me. And then I went up, and then the doctors came and visited me and tried to explain to me that what I had was probably a heart spasm caused by uh the Adderall and the caffeine and the energy drink, which is a possibility, but it still didn't really explain the troponin that was released because of the heart damage. And when I asked them that, they said, well, it doesn't really explain that. Okay. And I've had other people try to explain it, but they always kind of get hung up on that. So if there's a
There's a
cardiac doctor listening and they're like, well, it does explain it, well, then maybe it does. I don't know. I like my answer better. I think I was healed. So I think
there's
I
a
had a
movie
heart attack.
called Breakthrough, where I live. Lake St. Louis, Missouri is where this movie was based on and founded. It's real close by where I live. And a kid broke through the ice on a big lake, big pond, and was under. He was under a long time. They came out and got him and brought him to the hospital, and he was dead. And this doctor just kept working on him, refused to quit. I don't know why he refused to quit, but he refused to quit. and the kid came back to life. He was dead, I think, for 45 minutes. And a friend of mine, real good friend of mine, got to meet this doctor. You know, this movie's been out 10 years or whatever it is now, just the other day. And he says, "Hey man, you're that doctor, I'm told." "Yeah, yeah, that's me." "Hey, what was that like?" And he goes, the guy's face changes, like, this is years later. And he couldn't really put words to it. It was clear the doctor wanted to change the subject. Like, 10 years later, you're still having trouble with what you witnessed as a medical doctor. So I think my friend approached it from a, hey, explain what you medically saw. And the doctor did not want to, or just still didn't have the words. He's like, I don't know what happened, but the guy just shut down and refused to talk about it. He's got a big podcast. So he's like, hey, why don't you come on the podcast? He's like, can't have him on because he doesn't have the words or is not willing to, you know,
Mm.
share what he saw.
I mean, I've seen so many miracles in my life. I mean, my wife had an irreversible medical condition that was healed miraculously, and then she's had like a nodule on her thyroid that they were going to biopsy, and we prayed for her before she went in, and then it was gone. Then my daughter had she went deaf in her left ear. Like it was nerve damage, and the doctor was like, they gave her a hearing aid. She wore a hearing aid for like a year. The doctor was like, this is nerve damage, it doesn't get better. And her friends were like, hey, we're going to pray for you that you get better. And we had just kind of resigned ourselves because the doctor said it doesn't get
Yeah.
any better. Like it doesn't, it's nerve damage, you can't even fix that with surgery. And we're like, okay. So she went, her friends were praying for her faithfully, just like little 12-year-old friends do.
Mm-hmm.
And she woke up one morning and she said her head was tingly and she like yawned, and she heard a snap and she put her hearing aid in, and it like was really super loud because her hearing came back. So she went back to the same hearing doctor and tested, and her hearing in both of her ears was then better than it was before. So, man, God does miracles. So, but he didn't heal me from my ADHD. But I did try Strattera, which is like the alternative that's not quite the stimulant after the Adderall, but it really didn't do anything for me. Um, like I just still kind of felt dumb. So I just said, I'm not going to take it if it's not helping.
Yeah.
So what I've done since is I've just really um, I've just worked hard to be more organized. Um, and accept the doomsday piles and the scatteredness of the sum of the things, and try to be more organized, a little bit more organized digitally, in that realm. I have more motivation, like in that sense, than I did. I also have a good, I I try to be better when it comes to leadership and teams and delegation and things like that, where I can be. And that makes a big difference. Like knowing that, like, okay, like the people around me like know this is what I can take care of, and then this is what Josh can take care of, and I think that makes a big difference too. um and uh like when people say, Josh, can you take care of this for me, I'll say, I can. I'm going to need you to remind me. And that they'll just be like, okay, no problem. And I'll just be honest with my shortcomings. I'll be like, hey, look, you, like, people will say, hey, Josh, you want to get together? And I'm like, hey, listen, I'd love to, but what I'm gonna need you to do is I'm gonna need you to text me and remind me, because if you don't, I won't remember that we had this conversation. And people are like, oh yeah, no problem. And if they don't, then that's on them.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I let them know I'm not gonna remember this conversation in 24 hours. And it's not that you don't matter to me, it's just that that's the way my brain works.
So for people listening that either have ADHD or have a spouse that has ADHD, or maybe kids that do, one of my daughters does as well, is um, learn what you can about it. And I'm speaking from the spouse or the parent. Uh, and by just understanding the term doomsday pile when it was first exposed to me, I'm like, what the? No, that's crazy. However, I see them various places and like, and then as I've read and paid attention, I'm like, holy cow, this is a super, super common thing. And a lot of these ADHD behaviors, it's not unique to a person. It's a trait, it's a characteristic. So you can read books about this stuff. There's some podcasts about it. But once you understand this isn't your wife or your kids intentionally doing things to make you angry. And Josh was talking earlier about like where your heart is and how what your intention is down the road. What do you want to regret down the road? This is an area where you could absolutely create division and divisiveness and harbor anger and resentment for years. And speaking personally, I did for a while. Like, I don't get why this rapper needs to be here and another one needs to be there. And so rather than that, it's like, hey, what can we do? How can we team up on this so that we can, make things where dad is comfortable, where dad's not going crazy. And,
Right.
it could be, hey, let's, clean up for 5 minutes. We'll set a timer. Hey, whatever. But setting up routines. And then also, you mentioned grace earlier, just having grace for people. Hey, I get it. Like this doomsday pile, since we've been talking about that. Okay. Like it's a thing. You don't have to necessarily understand the thing and do the thing yourself, but understand it in their world, that's a normal behavior. And um, since I've opened myself up to that and learned about, like, oh, this is so much easier to work through, um, knowing that it's not my wife against me. It's a behavior with her, like personality. And then there's, benefits to ADHD also. So it's not like, normal versus ADHD. It's no, ADHD people have all these attributes and abilities. And one of my buddies is into all this stuff. He's like, oh, you're ADHD too. Like, you think
Yeah.
you're not. It
I
was,
think I think honestly, I think everybody is, well, honestly. So here's my psychological therapy if you're ready. My psychology therapy. I think that everybody is a little bit bat crap crazy, just in varying degrees. Everybody's crazy, you know. And I mean, now if you say that around crazy people, they get a little bit offended. But it's, I mean, I'm just saying, everybody is crazy in varying degrees. And the sooner we all accept it, the happier we're all going to be, you know. And, and it's just like recognizing that really, like, everybody's a little bit OCD, everybody's a little bit PTSD, everybody's a little bit ADHD. Like we're all like, like even if autism is a spectrum, we're all a little bit on it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah, yeah.
we all are, like, it's all a little bit, all of us, you know. And I think that when we recognize that and accept that, then we can understand people a little bit better. I was doing some, I think you'll appreciate this too. Are you familiar with EMDR? I don't even know what it stands for, but so um it's a therapy process. I learned about it.
Sound,
What's that?
sound.
So it's basically, it's like using bilateral stimulation, and they typically, sometimes there's sound involved, but like a lot of times the therapy, they'll use like light, and they'll use like glasses with like there'll be lights that flash on either side, and they
Okay.
use like a clicker. When you see the light on the
Hmm.
left, you
Hmm.
click the light. When you see it on the right, and you use it only to stimulate both sides of your brain. You can also use it with sound, like bilateral sounds. But what the point of it is to get both sides of your brain working while you then process memory, and you use it to help you recall memory, and you work through memories. So I call it doing some bootleg EMDR, because I'm not, I'm not paying a therapist to do.
Right,
I don't
right.
have a therapist. I learned about it from someone who is going through therapy. They described the process, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. you know. So I get in the pool, and I'm treading water, and I have on some waterproof headphones, and I'm listening to some music that's like, just like some frequencies that go back and forth, between each ear. And I'm closing my eyes, and I'm treading water in the deep end of the pool. And I'm like, I'm going back to some pretty traumatic things that happened to me as a kid. I was bullied pretty bad. And I never understood, like, why didn't I talk to my parents about this? And I'm like, why couldn't I tell them about this? when I was, I'll tell you the whole memory because this is a pretty powerful moment to me. I'm 5 years old. It's like late fall. And these teenage boys at the bus stop walk up behind me. They steal my hat. They throw it on top of the soda machine. And they light matches out of a book of matches and they put them out on the back of my neck. They
Mm.
burned me with matches. Like not just one, like a few of them. And I just stood there and I couldn't tell my parents about it. I get on the bus and I remember being afraid. And they heard about it from one of the other kids, like one of the other teenagers told my parents. And my parents like fought for me and made sure that I got another bus stop away from the kids, and those kids got put on another school bus and they got in trouble. But I wasn't the one to tell my parents. And this whole time, I've always wondered, like, why didn't I tell my parents? Why did I not feel safe enough to tell them? And they always wanted to know it too. And, I mean, I haven't really talked to them about this and I never really understood why. And so I just was kind of like, I want to try to unlock that memory and try to figure out why. And so I'm in the pool and I'm part of like, I think healthy EMDR is having a relationship with God. And so I'm
Hmm.
praying and I'm asking God to show me, why, like, help me remember this and help me understand this. And so like, I'm just walking through the memory with that kind of prayer in mind. And I'd forgotten about the hat. I didn't remember that until I'm walking through it this time. And it stopped there, them stealing the hat. And I'm like, why? Oh, because to me, this memory was, I'd forgotten, why was I even wearing the hat? Because this was an early memory. And I remembered, oh, they had taken my hat before and I got in trouble
Mm.
because to my parents, I just lost my hat and I was always losing stuff. I'd already lost a lunchbox and I'd lost my coat and I had lost my homework and I had lost all kinds of stuff.
Mm.
Even though it was still early fall, I'd already lost a bunch of stuff and gotten in trouble. And this was just one more thing that I had lost and was going to get
Yep.
in trouble for.
Gosh, that makes so much sense.
And I'm like, little ADHD jaw. And so, like, I just had this revelation, which I believe was a revelation from the Lord, where it's like, hey, buddy, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain just works differently and you lose stuff. But the things about you that everybody else thinks are wrong are also the things about you that make you creative, that make you super intelligent, that help you come up with ideas that nobody else can come up with. And I'm like sitting here treading water in the pool and I just start weeping. And I'm like, man, what? This makes so much sense. Just realizing like, I get it. Like I've held on to this memory and missed that. I missed that for 46 years. I didn't see that. I just remembered getting burned with the matches and not understanding why I couldn't tell my parents because I was afraid to get in trouble because I'd gotten in trouble for losing the stuff. And I'm
Wow.
like, wow. I mean, they weren't mean to me. Like I didn't get beat or spanked or anything
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I just didn't want to get in trouble again, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there, my ADHD was showing up even at 5 years old. So that
Yeah.
was a really recent revelation for me. That was just like last week. So
Yeah. I can hear God talking exactly like that.
hey,
Uh,
buddy.
yeah. Yeah. I've had conversations like that myself where, uh, got it. Yeah. Thanks, man. Like, a lot of times people want to think about God reverently and holier than thou and the all powerful and almighty. And yes, all that's true.
Yeah. He's
And
also dad.
he's also dad and he's got a sense of humor. And, you
Mhm.
know, so sometimes his voice can sound differently and it can sound like, hey, buddy, I love you, man. Remember that thing you did?
Mhm.
Things work themselves out, like, in your case, creativity and musician and artist and a bunch of things. It made me laugh. My daughter left her softball bag, so the bat, the helmet, the gloves, and the glove was an amazing glove
Mm.
at a younger age. And of course, kids can lose things. Um, However, she's also the ADHD one. And so I'm like, huh. And anyway, we left the park, two daughters, two things of softball gear, one thing of softball gear in the car. And, being a dad, we might not pay as close attention to some things. Hey, kids, we got all the softball stuff? Yep. Are you sure? Yep. All right, moving on. And then get home. I'm like, why are we not unloading two bags? Why are we only unloading one? Go back to the park. Of course, it's gone. You know, like, I got to go buy all new softball gear, which costs a pretty penny. And, but you made me think about that. Like,
Mm.
you know, how hard to come down on her about things like that. Understand she's different than my other daughter. They're both different. So, and since that time, it's like, hey, that's kind of on me. Like, I can blame all that on a 5-year-old or however old she was. Or should I have inspected what I expected? Yes. Yeah, I should have just looked over in the back seat, saw if the stuff was there. Like, that's too much responsibility to put on a 5 or 6-year-old and then add ADHD, which at the time I don't know that we were convinced as parents. Maybe we had our fingers crossed at that time. Please do.
Or even fully understand. It's hard to understand it. I think I don't like even as an adult who has had it my whole life, I don't even know that I fully understand it sometimes.
Yeah,
Like
my wife didn't, over the last, I don't know how many years, 5 years, 10 years, where she's like, she even showed me a checklist. She goes, hey, look at this checklist. Tell me which ones you'd check for me. I'm like, oh, this is bad. It's
yeah.
like, I think it's all of them. And then, with your wife, you're like, how many do you think you have?
Right. And
How do
when
I step into this conversation of, I don't want to convict you of all these behaviors. And she's, we talk through it and I'm like, yeah, sure. If this is a physician type checklist, I mean, I was the physician, like signing off, like, absolutely.
well, and if we come back to the thing that I was talking about earlier, when we come back to responsibility, if it is to be, it's up to me. And
Hmm.
so even with ADHD, you know, I am also responsible for my behavior.
Hmm.
And so yes, I have struggle. Yes, I have a deficiency. I mean, that is in the word. you know there are things I struggle with and I have problems, but it's still up to me to figure that out. And if that means I need help, then it's up to me to ask for help. And now as a little kid, I didn't know how to ask for help, and so that's where dad and mom have to help, and that's where, but as a grown up, okay, so I have to be aware of my shortcomings, and I have to be the one to say, this is where I need help. And hopefully it's up to me then to make sure I have the right people in my life that I can trust to help me, you know have to have my back, to help me, like if I know this is where I'm weak, I have to make sure I have the right people in my life, and then also then to make sure that I'm there in their life, that I have the strengths to help meet their needs where they need to, but
Hmm.
because you can't just have people meet your needs all the time if you're not meeting their needs. And so, that's important to be able to make sure that you're also paying into their lives when they need it. But yeah, that I think that's important too, because a lot of times, like I know so many people that will use whatever their struggle is, whether it's ADHD, whether it's whatever mental illness, whatever mental struggle, whatever deficiency of any kind, they will use it as an excuse to not get better, to not do the thing. And you can't do that. Like ADHD is no excuse to mistreat your spouse. ADHD is no excuse not to succeed, and neither is any other thing that you want to throw out there. you know well, I have depression. No, you still have to do the thing. you know you have depression. Okay, well then how do you get better? How do you
I was
heal?
talking to another new listener this week, and he's like 46 years old, and I was married once and then that didn't work out. And then I went on to my second wife and, that didn't work out. And then I went on to my third wife and I was realizing that wasn't going to work out either. And the drugs and the things and the kid relationships. And then I realized there's one common denominator in the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm blaming everybody for years and years and years, and come to find out, the problem was inside me. And
Yep.
he's like, he decided to do something about it. He's like, I'm so excited that I consciously realized what it was, and then made the choice to do things differently. So, like what you're saying, you can use it as an excuse, or you can figure a way out, and figure out a way to get things done. I like what you said with asking others for help. Hey, this is an area that, I could use a little help with. You're asking me to do this, and I'm willing, and I can. And I could use a little accountability or a reminder or a check in or a whatever.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good spot to finish off the podcast. One thing that I ask guests to do is throw a challenge out for guys, something they can do week to week in between podcasts that'll help them become a better dad. And I'll throw something out to the guys while you're thinking through that, and then we'll get to how guys can connect with you and stuff like that as well. So I wasn't planning on asking this, but guys, if you've got anything that you'd like to share, if you know somebody with ADHD, if you've got ADHD, if your kids have ADHD, I'm totally curious on this topic because I'm always learning more of just anything about it. Like, so if you've got experience and you've got something to share, I would love to hear your experience with ADHD. So again, it could be you, could be your spouse, could be kids, but you know, I'd love to get a little kind of crowd sharing wisdom. So message me, you know, Dan Lewig's, Facebook, or at the Christian Dad Podcast at gmail.com. Just shoot me a message. I'd love to hear about what you've gone through, whether it's personally or with a spouse or with kids. Love to hear where you're at, and who knows, maybe we all learned something together. But appreciate you guys sharing. So Josh, how can people connect with you? Where are you at? Where can they connect with you? And then throw a challenge out for us also.
Yeah. So if you want to connect with me and the work I'm doing, if you go to manlihood.com, you'll see what we're doing there. We've got some premium content at Manlihood Plus, which you can access on Spotify or YouTube. And then we've got the Manlihood Man Cave, which is our private Facebook group, which is free to join. And the guys there are always connecting and really kind of encouraging each other. It's we have a good community where just trying to help men be better men. So I actually like to say helping men become even better men, because I think men are generally pretty good guys. So
Nice, nice. I like that.
I try to make that point, because I don't want to assume that men are bad. I think that's something that's, there's enough people saying that out there. Like they're trying to say it differently. So a challenge to help men be better dads. Is that what the challenge is for?
Better dads, better husbands, better men, even better men.
Yeah, even better men. Um, let's stick with the dad route. The challenge this week. Why don't you make it a point to this week find a way to show your kids some grace. So when they mess up, because your kids are gonna mess up at something this week, find a way to show them some unmerited favor. So I'm not saying let them off the hook. I'm not saying don't punish them. I'm not saying like don't correct them or let them get away with something. I'm just saying find a way to show them grace. So, son, you messed up, and what you deserve is this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this instead. So even though you deserve this, this is what you're going to get, because I love you. And I'm just, it might just blow their mind. You can't do it for everything all the time, because I know you have to have discipline. I get it. Just do it once, do it twice. Just show them some grace. I think they'll appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. So big part of that could be just taking a deep breath and exhaling before you respond. or react. So
Mhm.
choose to respond instead of react this week. And, say, hey, God, help me show a little grace here. And then see how your attitude and your behavior and your actions change. But I think that's a good one. I think that's a good one. I don't think anybody's ever recommended that before, but practicing grace, practicing uh, behavior modification. You can even practice in advance. You can picture your kid screwing something up. And how do I normally react? And how could I choose to respond this time instead? So, um, yeah, that's a really, really good one. And you might have plenty of opportunities since we've got some extra days off work and extra family packed around us
Yeah,
for
that's true.
Thanksgiving. So,
Yeah.
guys, I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and could be a child that you get to give grace to, or could be a family member. You might have lots of opportunity for certain family members that maybe get underneath your skin. So work through that this holiday. Enjoy this holiday. You mentioned anticipate your regrets. So there's one right there for me. Anticipate your regrets. If this Thanksgiving doesn't go well in certain areas with certain people, what will your regrets be? And how can we back up, come up with a new plan so that we don't have those regrets that are predictable? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Josh. God bless you guys. Hope you all have a fantastic Thanksgiving and look forward to hearing your tips and thoughts about ADHD. Catch you guys next week. Bye bye.
Thank you.